Hello and welcome to another edition of History After Hours podcast. This is season 3, episode 10. It is a very special Veterans Day podcast. And in this conversation, we are going to talk to some veterans. We want to thank Mr. Ray Borel, Mr. Adam Borel, Mr. Stony Evans, Mr. Brooks Lee, and Mrs. Karrie Irwin for their time. And they're going to share some great stories. They're going to talk about their own personal experience in the military. So stay tuned for that. Also, you can find us on History After Hours on Facebook, History Hours PC on Twitter, History After Hours on SoundCloud and YouTube. So happy Veterans Day and enjoy the podcast. Hello and welcome to History After Hours podcast. My name is Kevin Pumphrey and with me is
Ron Franklin.
And today we have a very special Veterans Day podcast. We have some veterans with us today. And so first of all, let's just go around, if you don't mind, telling us your name, introducing yourselves, and telling us a little bit about your background. We'll start over here. Ladies first.
I'm Karrie Irwin. I served in the Army from 1994 to 1998.
What propelled you to get into the Army?
I kind of had no direction going on out of high school. Was working, trying to get into college, didn't have any way to pay for it. Was getting myself into trouble and decided that I really needed some direction. So my entire family, military, uncle, my dad, and my granddad from England was actually in the British Army as well. So
Okay. What do you do now?
now,
Yeah.
I teach special education and I teach 6th grade science, and I coach soccer and coach cross country.
All right, so you might see some commonalities among these veterans, many of them anyway. All right, Brooks.
My name is Brooks Lee, and I served from 2004 to 2006 in the Air Force. I decided to get in after a few years of college, had my basics and everything out of the way, but wasn't really certain what I wanted to do yet for a career, and had a little downtime. And, this was soon after 9/11. I had some friends that had joined up, and, I just felt the calling to sign up and serve. I wanted to do my part. And so I signed up in 2004, and, now I am a teacher, an 8th grade social studies teacher, 10th grade world history this year. And,
Awesome. Okay. Stony.
My name's Stony Evans. I'm now a school library media specialist. I've been here at Lakeside for 8 years. I've served in the Arkansas Army National Guard from 2002 to 2014, so 12 years that I spent in the 106 Army Band. And I think the question was, what propelled all of us to join.
Right.
Well, at the time when I found out about the 106 Army Band, I was a band director, and I was at a state music conference, band conference, and I saw these guys that were band directors that I knew, and they were in uniform, and I was like, what's this all about? And then discovered that there was a band here in the state. And I thought, well, that could be a cool way to serve. So at 28 years old, I enlisted in the Army National Guard to play saxophone for the Army Band, and I enjoyed doing that for the 12 years that I was in.
Okay, good, great.
Ray Borel. I'm actually one of the assistants at the library here. I served from 2008 to 2014. I have a unique story. I was a lot older when I went in. I was 41 when I went through basic training, and I actually joined with my oldest son. We went through basic and AIT together, which was a very unique circumstance.
Was it competitive for y'all?
Absolutely, absolutely. The drill sergeants had a field day with us at first, but soon thereafter they figured out we were good soldiers, so we had leadership positions pretty quickly. So I wanted to join when I was much younger, and life just got in the way. I met my wife, Adam's mom, and I just didn't do it. I've been a patriot my entire life. When I was in art school and high school, my favorite colors to deal with were red, white, and blue. I mean, everybody just knew that's just who I was. And we were actually running around East Mountain, and we just began discussing what it might be like. I was at a place in my life where I wanted to do something more. And we talked about it. We talked to a recruiter, and here we are today. And we went through all that together. And he has a much more interesting story, though. So.
Okay.
My name is Adam Borel. Served in the Army National Guard and a variety of other Army and Marine Corps units from 2009 to present. I'm actually in the middle of a med board now. I joined for a lot of the same reason that a lot of folks did, and it was patriotism. I can remember very distinctly 9/11 when I was in 7th grade at this middle school, just right down the road. I was late that day. I was never late. It was a very rare occurrence for me. I'm walking down the hallway, and a kid in one of my classes is running down the hallway screaming, "It's World War III! It's World War III!" I was just a kid, 7th grade, but even then I knew, something horrible had happened to our country, and we had been attacked by a foreign entity on our own soil. That was something that was unprecedented, at least for my generation. We had, at least me growing up, this idea that we were untouchable, and we found out real quick that that wasn't the case. From then on, I pretty well knew, at least to some degree, for the rest of my high school career, kind of what I wanted to do, and that was to be a soldier. And then in 2009, I got my chance. I enlisted, and went on from there to a variety of different assignments, from 3 tours to Afghanistan, 1 tour in Iraq, and a whole lot of interesting assignments in between.
That's awesome. Well, usually on the podcast, they hear two history teachers ramble about political events, current events, but this is a great opportunity for you guys to hopefully share some stories. So when you look back at your service, when you look back at some of the things that maybe shaped you or changed you, do you have any specific moments, and I know maybe for you that this might stand out a little bit more because it's still very much a part of what you are, but if you look back at what you've done, and this whole podcast is kind of to honor veterans, so we honor you and thank you for your service, but specifically share with everybody some experiences that maybe you found were unique or impactful in your life.
I want to start off just by saying, and I caught Ron on the hall, we were talking about this earlier, but I remember basic training really making me realize the freedoms that I take for granted every day. I mean, first of all, you go into
Absolutely.
any basic training situation, and they peel your hair off, or they make you change your hairstyle, and then they take away your civilian clothes that you chose to wear, and they give you clothes that they choose for you to wear. So everybody is the same. But I remember thinking in those first few weeks of basic training, man, I've got it pretty good at home. I can watch TV. I can watch TV when I want. I can go to the refrigerator when I want. Now, and I think
Absolutely.
you all
Right.
probably had that moment. And when I got back after basic, I took those things and I cherished them, because it was like, man, I think everybody should have some experience like that to realize the freedoms that we have.
Definitely.
Just little things that we don't even think about until you have them all stripped away for 8 or 9 weeks.
That's something I think about right now too. A lot of kids kind of feel like, I hate saying it, a lot of them are entitled. They feel like everything's here for me, and I've always said this, that changed, basic training changed my life. I mean, I thought the world revolved around me. I thought everything was going to be good. It was hunky dory. I could do what I wanted to do, and it was real quick. It made me, I wasn't self-centered anymore. I realized there was more to this world than just me. And there was more out there that I needed to take care of. And I mean that, I went home and cried for the first time ever. I thought everything was always going to be okay. Everything was always going to be, work out. But that was my family. My family took care of me and kind of, took care of all the bad and said, it's all good. We'll take care of you. And then I realized, wow. And so, I mean, I think the first thing I remember thinking when I got out of basic training, I was like, what do I do now? Who's going to tell me where to go now? Because they told us when to eat, they told us when to sleep, and they told us when to wake up and how far we were going to run that day, and they kept us in tip-top shape. And so it was one of those. It was kind of scary, I think, at first when I went to my first duty station. I didn't know I'm allowed to walk out here by myself. Right. I mean, so, it just was a little scary at first, and then I realized that what I had done and what I'd earned, this right now to be serving in the military. I mean, it was an honor for me to be able to wear my uniform and do the duties they asked me to, because they're trusting me to do it now.
Do you guys have a specific basic training story that really kind of stands out? Is there a moment where you're like, this is...
I can remember one. You probably thinking
I'm
the
thinking
same
the same
one.
one, yeah.
So it was so. I can't speak for everyone else, but when you first get to basic training, you go to reception, and reception is hell. It's terrible because they keep reminding you, almost like it's a fun game for them, that you're not to basic training yet. This is just, it's like purgatory. This is hell before you get to hell. And so what they'll do is you can't, there's like an abundance of insane rules. Anyway, so we get there at like 02 in the morning, and they give us some stuff, basically enough to get us through the next day. So we get like PTs, just stuff so that we can all look the same, like Stony said. Everybody looks the same. And he and I get downstairs at 05 after they come over the intercom and the lights come on and everybody's screaming at you to get downstairs. And there's this guy, this poor kid, just getting annihilated by this drill sergeant. He's got his big brown round, their campaign hats, and he's got the brim of that, and he's poking this kid right in the bridge of the nose, and just annihilating him, just destroying his soul. And he and I look at each other and don't even say a word, but he and I look at each other and just say to ourselves, oh man, what did we do? What have we gotten ourselves into? This is a terrible mistake. And this is after, we traveled the country and, competed in jiu-jitsu together. We thought we were pretty tough guys. And we get downstairs and we're like, oh no, what have we done? And yeah.
It was exactly oh my gosh, what have I done here? But I was actually thinking of a different one. I was thinking of the time in the DFAC when, again, the drill sergeants had a blast with us.
Yeah.
And he was in a different platoon than I was in, and he happened not to have a button, all the way button.
Super rare for me. That never happened.
His drill sergeant calls me across the DFAC as I'm watching in, and I'm PG at this time, and he sends me over here, and he says, Private Borel, what do you see wrong over here with your son or your other private here? And he said, button his buttons up. He was the country guy, man. And right there, and he's turning red and he's embarrassed, and the entire DFAC is looking at what's going on.
Yeah, it was terrible. Because I was my own worst critic. Drill sergeants they're smart guys. They figure out pretty quick how to get to you. Some guys you got to smoke them, which translate that to civilian. They gotta make you sweat a lot.
Hard-headed.
Some guys they gotta hit you with paperwork. Some guys all they gotta do, and this is the kind of soldier I was. All they had to do was look at me. I knew, and I would tear myself apart, and they knew it.
So they make a special effort to take the knuckleheads down and get everybody lined up.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Already matters, right?
They're examples.
Absolutely.
They get made examples of.
Absolutely.
And it's not about really picking and choosing and who they're taking out. They're breaking you down mentally
Right.
to build you up to be
Yes.
the best soldier you can be.
Right.
So if you're
All right, so explain that to people who either haven't been or who are thinking about going. Like, what is the overall purpose of doing that?
So they have to take away. It's basically like she was saying. They have to take away everything that you were. It's resocialization, is what it is, right? So like Stony said, it starts with a haircut and taking away your clothes, and then the next step is taking away your freedoms. So they'll take away, when you can go to the bathroom. It gets that in depth. When you can go to sleep, when you wake up, when you can run, when you can look this way, then when you can look that way, when you can walk this way, when you stop. Every single thing you do is absolutely regimented to the T. You become one unit, one machine, and they remind you on a very regular basis that you are simply a cog in this machine.
Right.
And in order for this machine to continue functioning, you have to work as a cog in this machine. Everyone has to work together.
So in other words, if you were trying to be independent
Or an individual.
you have this job, but you're trying to do this. It's
Right.
not going to work. And the whole
Negative.
system breaks down.
Being an individual is a curse word in the Army.
that comes down to the safety of the entire unit.
Absolutely.
And when you're out in a real situation, you don't need anybody to be thinking twice about what they're doing and who they can
No.
rely on.
Right.
You all work as a team. You all know your job, and you do it. And there's
Absolutely.
no question.
Do they get to the point where they drum people out who just won't?
You will see some of that. It's difficult to. The resocialization works. It works because, like I said, it starts in small increments, and then it gets into greater increments. The Army has what they refer to as a walk, crawl, run phase, right? And so that's exactly how they do everything. So the initial crawl phase is them taking away your hair, putting you in a uniform. The next thing is them having you march and having you stay in a formation. Everyone looks the same, exactly the same, down to the T, down to where your buttons are, down to making sure these buttons are buttoned, these buttons are buttoned, these buttons are buttoned, and making sure that you have on the clothes underneath those clothes that are exactly like the guy next to you that has on those clothes, and they will test you. If you put on winter PTs and you don't have shorts underneath your pants, they're gonna find out, and everybody's gonna get it. And it's not to, the idea is not to punish everyone, it is to teach you a lesson. Initially, it feels like punishment. Initially, it feels like all they're trying to do is beat on you. That's not it. They're trying to teach you that what one does affects everyone else. This simple mistake here caused everybody to sweat. A simple mistake downrange, and everybody's dead. And it is that severe.
All right, let me follow that question up with another one. Do you think that in our society we would be better service members, just in general, civilians, if we all had some type of military service in our background?
Yes.
Is that something that you would promote, or do you think that's a thing?
I think it would be.
Say things like
I
that.
think
would be-
basic training for every 18-year-old I
Yeah.
think would be awesome, but I don't know necessarily.
It wouldn't
mean
work for
it means
everyone.
everybody.
Yeah.
So here's where I'll disagree probably with a lot of veterans, and here's why. I don't want a vast majority of civilians in my Army. I don't want them there because they're going to be liabilities. And that sounds harsh and it sounds rough to a lot of people. But the reason that we are the greatest military fighting force since the legions of Rome is because we are an all-volunteer fighting
Right,
force.
exactly.
Everyone that's there wants to be there and tries to stay. You have to try to stay. If you don't
Yeah.
try, you don't get to stay.
Not everyone makes it. We had a guy in our unit that he just was not cut out for it. I mean, he was a nice guy, but he just could not complete it as needed. So
Couldn't shoot,
Probably
right?
all
couldn't
saw
shoot.
that
He
too.
couldn't do some of the obstacles. He just wasn't.
Now, I am a fan of some sort of federal service, be it, I can't speak to other forms of federal service, but as far as actual military service, no. In smaller nations, that might work, but with the cross-section of ideologies and cultural differences that we have in the United States, I don't think that'd be effective.
I think that the basic training, though, just the idea of getting that kind of workout and that kind of discipline.
Yeah.
A little bit of a reality check.
It
Right.
was, and for me, I mean, I was a rough kid, and it really shook my world up and changed me. And like you said about the drill sergeants, they figure out your weak area and they fix it. And when you realize that they're not after you, they're for you. That's when you grow, and then
Right.
and then they build you up even further, and then you excel. I mean, it's a matter of having the desire and just not wanting to quit, and then figuring out what you're trying to fix, and you get it. I mean, it works.
Right.
It does, and you do have to want to be there, because they
Absolutely.
make you want to leave. They make you want to leave every day. And in fact, one thing that stuck out for me was them getting in your face. Every one of them. If I was the first integrated cycle of women and men. It was the first time that we'd been integrated. We didn't sleep in the same area. We had one bay on this side was the guys, and then another floor was the girls.
Right.
And but other than where we slept and lived, we did everything together. And it was new. It was new for the military. And I just remember the competition was fierce. And there was girls I remember that dropped out. Several dropped out. And it was. You'd see them crying, and they'd stand there, and they'd be, we'd be in formation, and you'd see, somebody tearing up, and as soon as they saw that, they were in. You want to go home? I can send you home today. Let's
Right.
go. Let's pack it up. Let's get your paperwork done. I can do it. You want to quit. Let's quit. You don't want to be here anyway. Your boyfriend's back home. I mean, they just drilled
Absolutely.
it into you, and they made you, and and as soon as you got it up here that this is a game, this is breaking me down so I can be better. You can just stand there and.
Most of it's mental. For
Can you
sure.
expand on that? I think that's a very unique perspective from a female who came in with the first wave. Did you feel Did some women come in with a chip on their shoulder, like I've got to prove this is for all women? Did you have people that you felt, or did you have drill sergeants that maybe were trying to break girls? And did you feel any major difference the way they treated you than they treated somebody else? I mean, talk about being just a woman in the military.
I remember I had one drill sergeant who was kind of hateful to all women, and I had another female drill sergeant who could whoop him.
Right.
And her name was Drill Sergeant Spicer, and I will never forget her. She was this raspy voice. She's this little black lady about the same height as me. Oh, she was fierce, and she let you know. And she got in the drill sergeant's face before too. She had my back. I remember one time I got hospitalized while I was there. I got bronchitis and strep throat or something. I mean, I was sicker than a dog. What really helped me stick out and excel was I was a runner. And I could run with where I was at. I was the 5th fastest runner, all the guys and the girls, and that was awesome. So I mean, I kind of got taken under the wing a little bit because of my athletic ability. And I remember one day I couldn't run as fast, and I let her know because for me, I'm so competitive that it broke my heart that I couldn't get out there and do what I was supposed to do, and I didn't want anybody to think anything different of me. I wasn't quitting. I didn't want to quit, and I remember. Specifically, one day I was told, get out there, do the 2 miles in the back, and go straight to sick call. And I had this guy who didn't like girls, and he rode me the whole way. Why don't you quit? You're making my knees hurt. We're running so slow. How come you're doing this? Why don't you just get out of here? You're not meant to be here. This isn't a place for you anyway. And I remember just listening to him run and thinking, man, I could beat you any day. And I kept thinking that, and I just let it go. And finally, he just kept on talking and just trying to break me. And I said to him, can I remind you that we are by ourselves, male and female, and you're not supposed to be there with me like this. And he never said another word. I just remember, and we got back to the back to our barracks, and I went to. But that was like, he never messed with me again. And then I let that drill sergeant Spicer. She saw it going on, and she lit him up. But I think there's some guys that weren't ready for it, and there's some guys that were ready for it. But it's a slippery slope, okay? Because if you get in the field with somebody and they care more about taking care of you as a woman instead of doing their job, and that's most men, that they're protectors.
Yeah.
And if you're not equal with them and they want to take care of you, then they're jeopardizing the entire unit and themselves and you. And I mean, you have to be treated like another man, and that's really hard. So my husband, 27 years in the military, he said if I was in the military when he met me, he would have never married me. Not that he just didn't believe in it. He feels really strong about that, and a lot of people do, and I understand that point. In my head, I can outrun all of you, and I can outfight all of you. I mean, that was when I was 18 years old, that's what I thought. And a lot of times I would, and I got put toe to toe with men, and tried to hold my own. And naturally, men are built bigger than women and stronger. But I mean, it's just, I don't know. I think there's a lot of circumstances and jobs that people that are women do great in, and I still have mixed feelings about women being. On the battlefield. I feel like we're all, we're not all equal. In some areas, I might excel somewhere else that y'all don't, and you guys where I wouldn't. But, it's just a hard line to decide where you're going to stand at.
Right. No, that's definitely.
Isn't that one of the great things about the military, though, too, is that they look for places, like placement for people who, like, you're going to excel in this particular way, and then we're going to put you. Don't they look for ways to get that done? Or
you take aptitude tests and things like that before.
To a degree, it's actually gotten better. Now you actually take a physical aptitude test in addition to just your ASVAB. So, like, in order to qualify for a combat arms job, you have to be able to deadlift so much. You have to be able to jump so far. You have to be able to run so fast. It's not just something where, okay, well, this guy scored this on his ASVAB, he's intelligent enough to do it, go. It doesn't work that way anymore. And I think, the state of the military under General not General Mattis, General Retired Mattis, now Secretary Mattis, has improved quite a lot. I think we're getting back to what we as a military are supposed to do. What a lot of people forget due to the environments that we've been in for the past 16, 17 years now, where we've been trying to make friends. You send a bunch of trained killers over to make friends, and that's not what the military does. That's trying to open a wine bottle with a bayonet. It doesn't work. It will work eventually, but it's a
Interesting analogy. Yeah.
Well, it's a big mess,
Yeah.
right? People forget that the United States military, specifically the Army, is our job is to kill bad guys. That's what we do. At the end of the day, that's our job. We're not humanitarians. We're not a social experiment. We are we're there to kill bad guys. That's our job. With these physical aptitude tests, and with combat readiness tests that they're starting to implement now, I think we're going away from any sort of gender, color, or any sort of those biases, and what the standard is okay, you can do this. If you can do this, then you can do this job. Period. Personally speaking, from my experiences, I don't care what your gender is. I don't care where you're from. I don't care who you call God. I don't care about any of that nonsense. If you meet the standard, then you're fine. You're fine in my book. We're all green at the end of the day anyway. And that's what we've got to, as a military, get back to.
That kind of segues into the next part of what I was going to ask, is that considering the fact that we've been engaged in foreign wars basically and some of the kids that are going to listen to this podcast, we've been at war their entire lives.
Absolutely.
They've grown up without knowing a time that we've been relatively at peace or closer to home and try to take care of our own business. So what I want to ask is, what do you think about the direction that we're going with with the new administration, perhaps, or new technologies that we have in the military, say drone-based, more distant battlefield type things? We've got special ops that are moving in a lot of different cases. So, but just general thoughts on the direction the military is going and what might the future hold.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's what I'll tell you. A lot of people have a lot of opinions on us being involved in other countries. Specifically, we look at what is often referred to as nation building in Afghanistan, taking care of advising in Iraq. I can tell you, having spent most of my adult life in and out of those places, that those conflicts are absolutely necessary. And here's why. You cannot leave large swaths of land destabilized. You can't. Because when you do, you have issues like 9/11. So none of the 9/11 hijackers were Afghans. None of them were Pakistani. But they absolutely did train in the Afghan mountains in eastern Afghanistan. Another proof of concept of this is you look at the Philippines right now, how destabilized they are. The Philippine government, for the longest time, has left the province of Mindanao, which is the southern portion of the Philippines, completely alone. They've just left them to their own devices. There's a Muslim majority down there, and ISIS has taken root and is now conducting attacks throughout the rest of the country. Here are the facts. These terrorist groups, are not interested at all in staying in their own backyard. They're not. Al-Qaeda, which was kind of they're still around to a degree, but was the kind of the precursor to ISIS, has stated that their eventual goal is to have a black flag over the White House. What most Americans fail to understand and fail to realize is that people from different cultures and different places on a fundamental level think differently than they do. And that is the case. These people, and I won't go too far into it and get too gory or too bloody, but the facts are, these people, they do not understand much more than the edge of a blade. That's reality. It's a hard, harsh reality, but that is reality, and you simply cannot leave it alone.
Do you think, and this is for the whole panel, do you think that we've entered a state of perpetual warfare then?
I think we're going to be at war with this ideology for a very long time to come. Absolutely. You know, the thought came to me concerning should we be involved in certain areas. Evil prevails when good people do nothing. And there are times we just can't stand by and wait to be attacked or wait to be assaulted. There are places that we need to be, as he's talking about. These people are not, they want to convert you or kill you. And again, that's difficult for Americans to understand. But that is their mindset, and they're going to continue to do what they're doing until they achieve what they pursue or are pursuing, or they get killed in the process.
And let's preface that by saying that doesn't have anything to do with Islam. That's
Right.
That's not Islam.
Right.
These people, a vast majority of them, are being told by their elders in their villages that they have to do this in order to go to heaven. These people can't read. They don't know anything.
You're talking about the fundamentalists.
The higher ups know better.
Yeah.
The higher ups have an end state that it has nothing to do with Islam. This is a tool for them to use to manipulate the lower foot soldiers. The lower foot soldiers, these guys, like in these Afghan villages, they can't read. They have no idea what you're talking about when you say, well, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. They have no concept of time. They have no concept of real history. They know some stuff happened. They know that at some point in the past some Russians were here. They might be back. They might not be back. They don't have any concept of time. They know that the guy, their elder, the dude with the red beard, is telling them that they've got to do this to go fight the infidel, and they'll get 72 virgins, which has nothing to do with Islam. Mm-hmm. That's nowhere in the Quran. It's not there. To answer your question about the perpetual war, here's a really uncomfortable answer. The way we're fighting it right now, you're right. It will be perpetual. You simply are not going to eradicate an ideology the way we're doing it. There's one way to do it. It's an extremely uncomfortable answer, but it's reality.
You mentioned the concept of not using the military as a nation-building device. So is it realistic then that we could use military for hunting down the people who are trying to disrupt systems and trying to overthrow governments or trying to cause coup d'etat or terrorist attacks, and then couple that up with strong diplomacy for the people who are inside those countries who are intelligent enough to actually get something done? They have to build that themselves for it to actually work. Is that do you agree with that?
Yes, and ideally that's how it would work, right? And so, but what you'll find is the State Department falls down on their job doing that portion. That's the State Department's job, diplomacy, right? Can we all agree on that? Mm-hmm. So the State Department, if you've ever been in country, those guys, there's a State Department rep at every brigade combat team, and that guy is absolutely worthless. You heard it here first. That guy he's terrible. Somebody should take his paycheck. He should be fired immediately. Those guys don't meet with any elders. The guys that are meeting with elders are the colonels, are the sergeants major, are the captains, the lieutenants, and the NCOs. It was us, the guys on the ground with rifles, going out and talking to these guys. We're not diplomats. We're killers. That's our job. But yes, ideally that is the way it should be. We should be conducting targeting, taking people off the battlefield that shouldn't be there. People that you can capture and can potentially reform, sure, pull them off the battlefield. Although that has been proven that the recidivism rate is insane. It's crazy. You yank one of those guys off the battlefield, and it's like a badge of honor. They go back and they have better status than they had before. But yeah, ideally that is how it would work. The military should go in, do the fighting, and the State Department should go in and do the diplomatic thing. But they've been falling down on the job for 17 years.
Right. Follow-up question to that: what is our ultimate responsibility in the international scheme? Other countries are participating, but we are actually leading the charge, as far as I know. Is that the right method to get this done, or because we are largest, strongest, technologically advanced? Is that really our role, or should we get more people more involved?
We have more. We have 800 bases. I mean, we have bases 800, more than 800
right.
in more than 70 countries.
What I'm asking, I guess, is what's the rest of the world's responsibility to help pick up some of the stuff that we're doing?
Yeah.
Here's what you can. I mean, we can talk about responsibility and what should be doing, what should be going on all day long.
Or is it better for them just to back up and let us do it?
No, they need to participate. They absolutely do need to participate. And if you look at the original coalition in Afghanistan, the NATO coalition, there was a massive amount of different countries that were there. I personally worked with New Zealand on all four of my deployments. I worked with troops from New Zealand. They are an exceedingly small country, and they contribute to every single fight that we get involved in. I've stood beside British soldiers. I've stood beside French soldiers. I've supported French operations. And the French in Kapisa province. If you ever get a chance, Google Kapisa province in Afghanistan. It's a rough town. And the French Foreign Legion and the French troops went in there, and they got schwacked a whole lot. But they stood their ground, and they kept swacking. Kept going at it, kept going at it, kept going at it. That's something you won't hear very often. We like to rag on the French a whole lot, but I can tell you from personal experience, those guys go in there and do work. So they do help a little bit. But here's, as far as our responsibility. So we talked about what should be, right? What should be is these countries should take care of their own business, right? The Afghans should clean up their own country. The Iraqis should clean up their own country. The Syrians should clean up their own country. But imagine, if you will, that you live in a duplex and your neighbor lights his portion of the duplex on fire. Are you just going to let that duplex burn? Or are you going to put out the fire? You're going to put out the fire. The reality is that we live in a world community. What affects one affects everybody else. Everybody. Isolationism does not work. You can look back you guys are history teachers. You can look back through history. Isolationism doesn't work. You look at World War II, tried to stay out of it, didn't work out so good. You look at World War I, we had a vested interest in a lot of things that went on in there. Initially tried to stay out of it, didn't work out so good. If you look throughout history, you have to get involved. Even if it doesn't involve you directly, second and third order effects down the road will come back and bite you. You can't just ignore the fire that's in the duplex next door, because it'll spread and it'll burn your house down.
Let me ask you something. As far as other countries chipping in, doing their part, we mentioned some European countries that the United States fights alongside. What's your opinion on the situation in the Middle East with ISIS and our efforts to get other Middle Eastern countries to help in that fight? How successful has that been?
I'd say with countries like the Jordanians, it's been very, very successful. Here's the trouble with ISIS in Iraq and Syria. The only way I can describe it is a dumpster fire. So you have all kinds of different trash in a dumpster, right? Anything from dirty needles to gasoline to anything else anybody's thrown in there. That is what it's like trying to decipher, at least from an intelligence perspective, what's going on in Syria. The real issue is you have a lot of these countries that are beleaguered by their own efforts in their own countries and really just simply cannot produce very much. Countries like Saudi Arabia do produce a lot. The UAE does produce a lot, but the UAE is a very small country. What they don't produce in troops, they do make up for monetarily. They do send a lot of aid and a lot of money over. They do a lot of partnership missions, like in Kuwait. But what you really have, the big issue is and this is what prevents, I think, a lot of them from really being able to buckle down and take care of a lot of these real issues, is you have the Iranians and the Saudis that are basically in a power struggle, and then you have two echelons outside of them, the Russians and us, backing either party, trying to basically keep sway over the Middle East. And instead of dealing with the virus, which is ISIS, we'll have these little power plays and these little micro wars and these little smaller conflicts, for lack of a better term, that are really just power plays. You may have heard on the news. It's been a year ago since I was in Iraq, but a big deal was the fact that the Iranians were letting the Russians use an airfield in western Iran to use bombers, right, to fly into Syria. Huge deal, very big deal. The Iranians, since the revolution, have said that no one here but us. It's just us against the world, basically. And the fact that they let a foreign power use their, and they only let them do it for 2 weeks. But yeah, a very, very big deal. And that right there tells you exactly how much sway the Russian government has over the Iranians and how tight they really are. And then in addition to those layers, you have the Turks and you have the Kurds and you have about 50 other layers. I could go into probably a 2-hour tirade on the swamp that is Syria.
Let me then extend it just a second, because we've seen the ebb and flow since 9/11 of American people being with the military, then getting tired of the Iraq War. In 2008, we elected President Obama. One of the promises was to reduce our forces, let's get out of there, which eventually we did limit. And of course, ISIS increased in power, and there's some things that happened. Now we have President Trump, who is, he was in the campaign, our military's in disaster, we're gonna reboot, I guess you could say. Now, we saw in the anti-war Vietnam, American society, by the millions, stood up and said, this war, we don't like this war. A lot of people, a lot of even military people admitted we made a lot of mistakes. Lyndon B. Johnson refuses to run again. And of course, Nixon said, peace with honor, we're going to get out of there. And
McNamara himself turned against the war before it was all said and done. He said, I messed that up.
Right.
He admitted that.
And eventually, the American people kind of demanded, we never really seen that in American history. Do you think with all this stuff that's going on, and we're in this perpetual war for another 4, 5, 6, will the American people do something similar and be like, this is it? I mean, what are we doing? Because we had that feeling, I think, in 2007, 2008. It seemed like there was a big push against. I don't know if you remember how unpopular George W. Bush was towards the end of his presidency. But it seems like if I don't know what America needs. Last week in Niger, we heard there was people killed, and what are soldiers doing there? We didn't know about this. And Congress, we should be more transparent. So it's kind of like, what's the end game? And I know we already talked about that a little bit.
Let me time just a second, just to give you something else to think about as you formulate an answer on that. We've been, like I said a while ago, at war for so long, and a lot of these kids have grown up in a time where they don't know anything other than that. However, a lot of them don't think that much about it on a daily basis because it is not portrayed in the media very well, in my opinion. I want to see what your opinion is on that. There's not a lot of news coverage on that. We see people who are coming home and surprising their kids and popping out of boxes, but on a daily basis, there's not a lot of information about what's happening in Afghanistan, what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Iraq. And so it's almost like out of sight, out of mind. And do you think that plays into, is there a reason why it's underreported?
It's not interesting.
Yeah, we actually talked about that, and that was the point. Is like it's not clickbait. It doesn't draw eye, and that's crazy that we're at war, and that doesn't. That should be at the top of every news site.
Well, it should, but here's almost the bigger issue. And this is once again coming from an intelligence background. The media reporting that you do get is flawed. I mean, it couldn't be more flawed. Everyone in the media that is talking to you is selling you something. So, I mean, I feel like if the American people did eventually get to this point where they were tired of war, and I feel like, I can't speak to this totally because in 2007, 2008, I was here. I was in these hallways. I graduated in 2007. So I can't speak to too much of it. Regrettably, I didn't pay attention enough. But what I've seen since is when the American people tend to go against whatever the current administration has to say or is doing, it typically is media driven, and that's almost never accurate reporting, and it's not the public's fault. The public has a very limited form of limited amount of information to choose from. You have the media, which you can't trust. You have an internet source, which is of questionable, is questionable at best. You have your cousin Joe, who is a conspiracy theorist, who you also can't trust.
Well, let me extend it then. Have we turned a corner with technology to the point that military and engagements and the way we think of is different and maybe different forever, as far as like Russia and cyber attacks and the media, fake news, using the Middle East as a pawn. I mean, we just, it doesn't seem like old engagements as much as now a lot of it is digital world.
Right.
And talk just for a minute as we kind of start wrapping up here. Talk a little bit about because we're talking about the media, but technology. And I know some of you are really big tech guys. So let's talk a little bit about how technology is changing warfare or the military, if you don't mind, just for a moment.
I worked with ISR, which, for those that don't know, it's intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance drones, is the layman's term, for a big part of my career. And so, yeah, things have changed, and I won't go too far into it because the vast majority of it is classified, and for good reason. But yeah, technology is absolutely changing. But with it, not only the way we conduct warfare, but the threats to us are also changing. I'll tell you that, at least from my perspective, the biggest threat to the United States is not at all a North Korean missile. It's absolutely some hackers conducting what is referred to as a black sky event, which would black out power over a region or most of the country for weeks or months at a time. The destabilization that would cause is unprecedented and would, people laugh at shows like The Walking Dead, but you would see that sort of behavior. People would begin to eat each other, figuratively. Maybe some literally, but you would see people turning on each other, doing absolutely despicable things. So absolutely, technology has absolutely changed the face of warfare. China doesn't need to, like I said, launch a missile. They don't need to be able to touch you with an intercontinental, an ICBM. Don't have to. Don't need it. They can damage you severely, your infrastructure severely, with a keystroke. When I worked for the Department of Emergency Management here in Arkansas as an intelligence analyst, that was something that we threw out there. Was we talk about fake news, was conducting a terrorist attack, but not actually conducting it. So what's the goal of a terrorist attack? Scare people, right? Make people absolutely terrified. It's not to kill anybody. Killing is a byproduct. It happens as a result, but the real tool here is fear, is terror, because that terror will cause people to do things that you want them to do. It's a chess move, right? So what if you could produce a terror attack that you didn't actually have to produce? You didn't ever actually have to conduct it. You just produced seemingly credible reporting that it happened.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, once again, I'm now cognizant of your time as we push through.
I'm going to throw one more thing out here
Okay.
as we kind of wrap, and I don't know what else you've got left, but I'm going to say this. Every time I watch a politician on TV or give a speech or whatever it is, or maybe even on the floor of the Senate or the House, the president comes up and says his thing, or we see people who will meet someone who they know is a veteran or someone who is serving, and they'll say, and we even said it here as we began, we appreciate your service. Like, what's the best way for two questions, for the government and for common citizens to show respect for military service?
I would say
People who
right away it's acknowledging patriotism. Most people, that I think part of the reason we're looking at maybe some of the population turning against what's going on because they don't understand what's going on. They don't know someone who's personally been involved in it, the sacrifices that are made. We say we support our troops in word, but we don't always do it in deed. They come back.
So what's the best way then? How could we do it?
Show them, be with them, acknowledge them. Stand up during the national anthem. Stand up during the Pledge of Allegiance.
It's only a few minutes. I mean, and the other thing is, if you know family members, or I was a military wife for years, and people don't understand. Your husband's gone for 6 months, and you've got 5 kids, and you're by yourself. Just say hi, stop by, say I appreciate your husband being gone while you're taking care of all this by yourself.
Yeah.
That was the hardest thing.
When they come back with PTSD or they come back and they're broken and they're not absolutely perfect anymore, don't shun them. Don't kick them to the side. Yeah, we support you as long as you're okay and you're not broken. But if you come back and you've got some problems, PTSD's messing with you, you can't hold a job or whatever the case is, we don't want anything to do with you. Just get out of here. We don't want to employ you. We don't want anything to do with you.
And I can speak to that firsthand. I'm a 50% disabled veteran for PTSD. I got evac from my last deployment for PTSD from Iraq. I can tell you that, trying to find help after the fact was hard. you see a lot of these groups, and I'm not going to name any of them because I don't want to speak ill of anybody, but you see a lot of these groups that get a lot of money that say they support veterans, and I can tell you that money is really hard to find when you're trying to pay your electric bill, when you're trying to buy SpaghettiOs for your kid, when you know that in a couple weeks your car is going to get repoed. If you know a vet's hurting, find them and help them.
Do you think that the government itself should do more, or spend more money on Veterans Affairs, Veteran Administration, Veterans Hospitals, veteran housing, veteran rehabilitation? Because I saw a thing on TV and it says it's the Wounded Warriors Project, and I thought, how interesting, that the government is seemingly taking a back seat to that, because I understand people who go through VA or whatever, I've heard horror stories about going through the VA.
Oh my God.
But the idea that we as a community-based effort have to raise money and beg for money to help veterans in any way, shape, or form seems really ridiculous to me. When we spend billions of dollars on equipment, why can't we spend billions more and get it right for the veterans who need help now?
I'm not sure if spending more money is the key. I think spending the money better is the key.
It's getting the right people in the right places.
Yeah, you have a lot of
the bureaucracy.
You have a lot of these people that know they cannot be fired. They know that there's nothing that's going to happen to them. They know that no matter what happened, what they do or whatever, they have a nice, pleasant, cushy government job.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you now, when you're taking care of your family, medical wise, I can remember my daughter needed neurosurgery. Well, there was 3 neurosurgeons that got the bid. And I'm telling you what, the military takes the lowest bids
Every time.
Every time.
And it's not. And I can remember there's a guy in Shreveport, and he did my daughter's surgery for free. But he volunteered his time, left his family, decided that he was Dr. Willis and Dr. Nana's a huge team down in Shreveport. He volunteered frontline and left his family for a year because he decided that his service and his talent was, he needed to give it back to his country. He wanted to serve, and he was the kind of person that wants to do. There's people out there that do want to serve and do want to help out veterans and do want to help out military and military families. And that's where, and see, I'm on both sides of it. I was a family member, I was a dependent, I was a wife, and I was a service member. And I feel like sometimes the family members get pushed aside too.
Absolutely.
You don't get anything for.
Do you think that part of that comes from the idea that there's such a pride factor in for service members in particular, where they just don't feel comfortable asking for help?
Yeah, there is. I once again, I can speak to that too. I got my PTSD from my first deployment back in 2010. I deployed 4 more times after that.
But he shouldn't have to ask for the help though. That's the thing.
But there's a stigma attached to it.
Absolutely.
There's a stigma attached to it. They train like what I've been saying from the beginning of this podcast. From the day you start basic training, you scream things like, "What makes the green grass grow?"
Blood, bright red blood.
That's right. When you take every left step when you're running, it's kill, kill, kill. You're a bunch of trained killers. That's what we do. That's our job. And then when you get back home and you're broken and you feel like less of a person, I was an intelligence analyst. I hunted the most prolific terrorist organization of our time, 10 miles from the Pakistani border in eastern Afghanistan. Now I cut rocks.
So let me ask you this then, too, to go along with what you're saying. We do a good job of indoctrinating people into the system. Do you think that we could do a better job of helping people re-assimilate back into non-military?
I think they're doing a better job now.
Yeah.
My father, for one, I remember when he got out. He passed away in 2009, and I honestly believe it. He flew AWACS, and that he was kind of they were the forefront. They were the people that really they were out there first. They didn't have a lot of protection in the planes, and I've heard of several other people. He got ALS. He had Pick's disease. He had, and I've heard of the same symptoms and same deaths happening from the people that flew AWACS. And my dad got out and he had several injuries. He had, missing thumb. He was gone a lot, and he had a lot of injuries. And in his mind, and like you said, we're trained, his mind, save that money, save that disability for someone who really needs it.
Right.
And that's how it was. And so thank God a window opened up when my father passed away that my mother was able to buy back into the survivor benefit. And he still didn't get any of the disability, anything. He didn't want it. He wanted it for those people who really needed it. And like what with the post-traumatic stress, he thought those people needed it more. The people that lost limbs, the people that were, permanently damaged, that they couldn't go back into society and take care of themselves or their family. He wanted it for that. And that was the kind of soldiers we grew. But as we go on, we start seeing, when I got out, we had training where it told us, they had us write down and sit down with somebody getting out of the military and said, let's look at your record. All right, you had this injury, you had this injury, you have this, we've tested your hearing, you have this. Well, you don't qualify for anything, but you are disabled because if you've lost a hearing or they'll tell you what you apply for. And then, I think I get like $100 a month because of the loss of hearing that I had working where I worked and the injury. They write it down and they make sure they know. Had a bone chip in my knee when I was in the field. If this ever comes up in the future, then I'd go to the VA and get, I can have VA benefits, but I don't go to the VA. I'd rather go use my own insurance, but then they know it's on record. This is going to be taken care of. The military is supposed to take care of it. Now that my husband got out, and my husband's 75% disabled. He's 27 years in the military. Mm-hmm. Is it much better, the care? No. But the getting out and in the transition, they sent him to more transitions than what I went through, and they discussed a lot of the things that he could do and the things that where he could get help or what he could do getting out. But
if you could say something to people who, like Senator Tom Cotton was here with us, and he did a good job of coming and talking with kids and giving them talking about service and encouraging them those ways. If you could encourage him in some way to give, what could he do to help benefit veterans in particular? Anything that comes to mind?
I would tell him that he needs to reform his office when it comes to people that submit claims to him. I requested help from his office, and was more or less pushed to the side. I was deeply.
Do you think that has to do with the bureaucracy? And,
yes,
maybe
I
that
do.
even landed on his desk.
Yes, and I'm not blaming the senator at all.
He's prior service.
Yeah,
sure, right.
And that, which is why I turned to him. Senator Cotton was a soldier. He walked the walk, and that's why I turned to his office. But I do think that had to do probably with some of the bureaucracy that has to do with his office. But like I said, when I came home, since I was a guard guy, we were just cut off. We didn't have any income. We didn't have anything. And, not to get too gruesome, but it was a struggle day to day to keep me just wanting to keep living. That was where I was at. And that's why I was sent home. And when I reached out for help, there wasn't much around, which is unfortunate. So if I had anything to say to Senator Cotton's office, I would tell him he needs to have a talk with his aides.
1 in 8 soldiers are diagnosed, and servicemen, when they come back with PTSD. This is just PTSD. It's not anything to do with any other type of injuries. Those are just the ones that acknowledge that they needed some help, that they sought help. They don't because, like you said, there's a tag there. There's an immediate stigma where if you've got PTSD, we don't want anything to do with you. And guys know that. It affects their future service careers. It affects future employment in the civilian world. So they don't want to say anything. But if they do want to try and ask for help, there's so much crap that they have to go through to try and get it. It's ridiculous, the red tape that they have to endure.
So we need more patriotism from our bureaucrats
Yes, sir.
to make sure that they're doing the best they can to make sure that it's not just lip service. That
If they remember why they're
Yeah,
there.
they need to actually vote what they say they're going to vote. The reality is that veterans make up less than 1% of the population. We're not a very big voting pool. Period. That's reality. We aren't. If you look throughout history, I want to say it was somewhere around 11% of people signed up to go to World War II. I want to say it was 4% for Vietnam, and the number got lower in Desert Storm, and the number for the global war on terror was 0.45%.
Right now, that's where it is.
Less than half of a percent
1%.
signed up to go to 17 years of war. Never in our, and this is not to sound boastful, I don't think I'm better than anybody, and I think every veteran sitting here feels probably the same way. We're not better than anybody. We just did our jobs. But what I'll tell you is, and this is, I'll speak for people that can't speak for themselves. 19-year-old Specialist Ryan Grady, who died on the 1st of July in 2010 in eastern Afghanistan. I'll speak for him. Never in our country's history has so much been owed by so many to so few. That's what Veterans Day means to me. It's better men than me that didn't get to come home, and making sure their stories are told.
It's acknowledging the sacrifice of not only the veterans that go and do what needs to be done, but the families that are left behind that have to endure worrying every second of every day if what might take place, what might happen.
Yeah, that's any other thoughts, Stony? Like Veterans Day, what is it? What's in your heart? What is that?
And talk a little bit. Most of the people that are going to hear this initially are going to be kids. They're going to be 16, 15, 17 years old. I remember growing up in the Cold War, thinking about Russia and possible military. I didn't know at that time. It was the fear of the unknown to a degree. And I think we've talked about this with technology, with the media. Our kids are so detached from reality and what protects their freedom. So talk a little bit to the kids.
I was talking with Ray about this earlier today. What I remember most about my time in the 106 Army Band was Veterans Day. Every year, for years, we would go and put on our Class A uniforms and sit in the Capitol, and there would be many veterans that would come. I remember there was one gentleman that was there, had a Medal of Honor, and he was one of the only ones to survive in his unit in Vietnam. And he would be there every year. And getting to play those marches and, with all the pomp and circumstance, that's what I remember most about Veterans Day, and being able to do my part to recognize those people. And all of those people, I really like what Adam said, the people that never made it back, never forgetting, and always keeping that day. I mean, it's one day. Why can't we do it more often than that?
Exactly.
Why is it just one day? Every day should be Veterans Day. And I'm so grateful for the freedom that I had the right to make the choice, to serve for those 12 years, that I have a right to get up in the morning and eat what I want to for breakfast and watch television that was taken away from me while I was in basic training. That's what Veterans Day means to me. Never forgetting the sacrifices that have been made so that we can have choices.
Absolutely.
And to have a career goal or whatever it is that we want to do, to own things. I mean, there's so many freedoms that we take for granted, and thank a veteran.
Absolutely. I mean, you nailed it. Never forgetting the sacrifices that have been made, not only now, but through the past. I mean, and those that will be made in the future as well. It's huge sacrifices. They come at a very dear cost. But just hugely important to always acknowledge that sacrifice. That's what Veterans Day is.
What is it? They always used to say, freedom isn't free.
Mm-hmm.
It's not.
I think it's important. I mean, really important after being both wife and active duty. Remembering the family, that was probably, I bring that up because I remember going to the store the other day, and we were at, I can't remember, it's not a Lowe's, but it's like a Home Depot, but it's the green one over there by
Sutherland.
And they give military discounts. And I can remember going in there one time, and she said something to me. I was like, oh yeah, our military discount, which I think that is amazing. And when I go to dinner and people give us a military discount, we always just give it back to the server, because I think how great it is that you're honoring our military family, because most of them don't make enough money to go out to eat.
Right.
I mean, when you start basic training, you're making, I was making like $700 a month.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the statistics, you're below poverty level, and you qualify for all of your, government assistance. It's kind of crazy how we treat our military that way. But I just remember I went in there, and I was letting her know. I said, yeah, my husband was in here. I forgot for this military discount. And she goes, well, do you have a military ID? I said, oh, well, yes, I do. She says, oh, because we don't give it to the families, just to the member. And I'm like, and I really wanted to say, this is my family. He was serving for you. I served as well, but wow, that this just for that person, I thought. And if you go to any base cities near base, like go down to Shreveport, every store, every restaurant, every anything that you go into, any kind of anywhere you go eat, they'll give you, most everywhere recognizes that military presence is big, and they're gonna honor you and give you a 10% discount or 5% discount or whatever it is. And I feel like the further away we get, we forget about it. And you're not near a military base. You don't see military members. You don't see the uniform. I can remember as a teenager thinking how elite the military were and how great that would be and how it's someone special to be in the military. I can't believe it. And then I got in and I was just like, this is amazing, you know. And then now I see it and it's like some of these people think it's a joke almost, and that kind of hurts my feelings, thinking that they don't think of the military as the way they used to be in my mind. I feel like we're growing stronger now, but I think sometimes, like I said, out of sight, out of mind, kind of people don't see it and they don't think about it. And I know they want us there, but they don't want to talk about it.
Well, it goes back to what you said about taking things for granted. Is it fair to say that true patriotism is actions over words?
Yes.
Because I know a lot of people who will wear a pin or will slap a flag up somewhere, but then that's where the kind of the extent of it. So, if we want to leave on a point, I think this would be a good place to kind of wrap.
Yeah, I just want to thank you once again. I think the stories that you've told, as history teachers, we have made a career out of talking about history and obviously military.
Service.
Yeah, and we were talking about how we don't appreciate it. My AP U.S. history, they moved about 15 years ago. We're not going to do military history. It's just going to be social and political. And I do a Veterans Day with my students, a little presentation, and there's a poem I share with them. And at the end of it, I basically say it's not the poet or the social activist or the politician or the scholar that protects our rights. It's the soldier. And I think that conveying that the kids that freedom that we don't even know we have is because of soldiers on the ground, sacrificing their time, their lives, their family, to be out there putting their neck on the line for us who don't acknowledge it. I mean, this is the one thing that can bring both crazy left and right wing and all that together. Because at some point, I think we are going to all realize how much the military means and how much veterans are important to our society, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, because it's the one thing that can unite us.
I would say this in conclusion. The Army is good about, and the military in general, about bringing people from all different backgrounds together. We live together, we eat together, we work together. No matter what your system of belief is, coming together to focus on one goal, and they do it very well. They are able to bring that group of people together in order to accomplish something, and the civilian world can learn something from the Army in that regard.
Absolutely, that was definitely one of the biggest things I probably took away from all the lessons I learned overseas is when you're over there, it's a cross section of people, right? You don't like everybody you meet, but over there, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you like that person or not. There's going to be people you do and don't like over there, but the what you did know is that when bullets were flying and people were dying, that guy was still going to do his job, and that the goal, everyone knew the goal, and that was to get everybody home at the end of the day. That was the goal, and everybody was committed to that goal. And yeah, he's right. That's something the civilian world could take away, could remember from that.
All right, guys. Well, this has been a great episode. Thank you so much. It's a special Veterans Day, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.